going to take you back in time a little bit. It's 1980, and my very first job was here in Atlanta, Georgia at Farrell's Ice Cream Parlor at North Lake Mall. If any of y'all are from Atlanta, you might be familiar with that. So I worked as a busboy at that time. So it was the first job, and little did I know that that job would kind of create in me kind of a love and a passion, like Randy talked about, for the hospitality industry. It was the first in a very long line of hospitality jobs. And I'd ask you this morning, I mean, what percentage of people do you think currently work in a job that they really like to do? You know, where they enjoy it, they love what they do. So what I've read recently, pulling up some data, is it's probably somewhere between 25 and 35% that are truly happy and enjoy their career. So that means 65% aren't really happy. So fortunately for me and my family, I'm in that 25 to 30% range that truly enjoy the career and the jobs and the industry that I work in. And this morning, I'd like to share with you just a few key points that have enabled me to open up from scratch, like Randy talked about, a business in 2006. And it's also enabled me in the last 5 years, along with my business partner and the folks that work within the organization, to grow that business to almost $4 million annually this year. So we've experienced some really incredible growth in what y'all know is kind of a difficult time. The economy's not great. So hopefully, I'll share a few things with you. Recently, we were ranked number 3492 on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies, which is better than 3493. So anyway, point number one, first thing I'd like to talk about is doing something, for me, something that's in my wheelhouse, so to speak. Any of y'all baseball fans watching the World Series last night, and when St. Louis won, if you went to bed early, game 6 and 11 innings. But wheelhouse is, you know, as a baseball player, wheelhouse is when you'll hear it referred to when a pitcher throws a pitch kind of in a hitting zone that the batter's looking for. So last night, Freeze got a pitch in his wheelhouse, and he took it out and won the game. So it's doing what you enjoy to do and doing what you're good at. So you'll hear me refer to wheelhouse throughout this talk a little bit. As I mentioned at the start, my very first job was as a busboy at Farrell's Ice Cream Parlor restaurant. And I think at the time, the main reason I took that job, I was 16. Why do you take a job when you're 16? Because your dad's telling you need to get a job. Yeah. So they hired me, and my dad basically said, you know, you can either find another job or you can start mowing more yards than just ours. And you know what? I didn't like yard work. That was not in my wheelhouse. So if you ask my wife, she'll tell you it's not in my wheelhouse today too. So I hated yard work. So anyway, from that point on, I embarked in a career in the world of hospitality. I went to LSU from high school. Probably not the best decision I ever made, but I started off at LSU, but all the time working in hospitality industry. I mean, short order cook, bartending, waiting tables, managing restaurants, all wheelhouse, meaning I not only liked the work, I was designed, that's what I like to do. So through that point in time, through college, I came back from LSU after 3 years at the urging of my father, who wasn't real wild about my progress there, and I started at Georgia State University. So when I went to Georgia State, I got into the hospitality program. And Jay, I believe, are you a hospitality degree as well? Which was, we didn't know, but he just mentioned that to me as well. So a hospitality degree from Georgia State. And my first kind of 2 real jobs, once again in my wheelhouse, were at Cherokee Town and Country Club. If you're familiar with that club in Atlanta, one of the best clubs you could say in the city, if not in the country really. It's a first-class facility. And then I was the assistant club manager there, and then the club manager at Horseshoe Bend Country Club in Roswell. So, you know, that kind of gets you from 1980 to 92, wheelhouse, working in the industry, doing what I like to do and learning it pretty well. So in 1992, and this is kind of foundational for me in terms of experience, I accepted a position with an organization called Proof of the Pudding by MGR Inc., which is it's a pretty big off-premise caterer now. You know, handles stuff kind of like what we're doing here this morning. You know, breakfast, stuff like that, awards dinners and things of that nature. But at the time, Proof was a relatively small off-premise catering business. Probably doing about 1.5 million a year in sales. And one of the partners, Phil Noyes, owned the food service company MGR Inc. So that was kind of the big parent company. And MGR operated the food service, the corporate food service for the Georgia World Congress Center and the Georgia Dome. So it was a pretty big outfit, about $30 million a year. But at Proof of the Pudding, where I was working, was headed up by a gentleman named Guy Thompson. Now, 20 years later, Guy and I are still real good friends, and I consider him a good kind of business mentor of mine, and like I said, a good friend. He had a tremendous impact on my career, and you'll hear me talk about it in a little while. You know, the value of having mentors around you and working for people that are really good at what they do. And I was blessed in that sense that I worked with Guy, who was one of the best people in his industry, in that industry. Some other folks that really helped develop my career as well. But in 1992, when I started at Proof of the Pudding, I held 3 positions with them over 7 years. All kind of wheelhouse stuff. I opened up, if you're familiar, I know you are, the Gwinnett Civic and Cultural Center is what it was called in 1992. Now you know it as the Gwinnett Convention Center and the Gwinnett Arena. So Proof of the Pudding had the food service contract. They hired me as a general manager to go up there and work. I started as the opening GM up there in 92. And, you know, it was pretty cool stuff. I mean, at a young age, fairly young, I was the general manager of what was a new, big, dynamic, if you were from Gwinnett, it was a big deal for Gwinnett County at the time. It really had a strong local impact on the economy, and you see what it's doing today. I mean, the Gwinnett Arena and the Convention Center are cranking up there, and Proof of the Pudding still has a contract for the food service there. But, you know, we worked on stuff like the Bell South Classic, feeding all the corporate hospitality out there at Sugarloaf when they took the golf tournament from the Atlanta Country Club. So it was, you know, it was a pretty interesting position. And just a great opportunity to start off with Proof. And then from there, I moved down to the south side of town. Pretty big transition going from Gwinnett to College Park. Proof of the Pudding also operated, Proof of the Pudding also was operating the Georgia International Convention Center, which is a convention center down at the airport. Went down there to open, not open, but to be the GM down there. And, you know, that was big stuff. It was a big convention center. You do dinners for 5,000 people, luncheons, all the kind of stuff that I was talking about earlier. It was pretty cool, but it was a difficult sales process. Still in my wheelhouse in terms of what I like to do, but challenging in a sense that it wasn't quite the simple process of getting people into Gwinnett, getting sales in Georgia International Airport Convention Center with the challenges that presented. It was just kind of a difficult transition in the challenging labor market down there as well. You know, one of the big things we worked on for a couple of years down there was the Hooters 500 down at Atlanta Motor Speedway, which would have been, it's not the Hooters 500 anymore, but to this day, that particular event is the hardest I've ever worked in my life, and I still do not like NASCAR. I mean, I was in the middle of that infield trying to get beer out of the infield to go up to the suites on a sun, and it was, so NASCAR I'm not a big fan of. So anyways, in 1996 as general manager, I went to the corporate office for Proof of the Pudding, and I had the opportunity to work on what happened in 96. Olympic Games, correct. And I really had the opportunity to be intimately involved with the Olympics, which for being in the hospitality industry and being in something that you love, that's just like a signature event that you can hang your hat on the rest of your life. You know, it was so cool to be in the sales process, in the logistics process. I mean, it was huge. I mean, for what we were doing, from where you are to going off. I mean, we fed 500,000 people in 30 days. So I'm not talking about little stuff. I'm talking about where we just went from this to this overnight. And the challenges it represented were immense, but still incredible opportunity for me to work on, given what I do for a living. Talked about the 500,000 people, the type of clients, Sports Illustrated, Avon, Home Depot, the sponsor villages, which was where all the corporate hospitality was for the Olympics, that the Olympics were hosting. Nike and Bell South were my pieces of that puzzle, and they had different hospitalities all over the town. If you were here then, Nike had a couple different spots. Bell South had a couple different spots where they would host their clients. So those were kind of the things that I was responsible for and pulling that off, and it was just, like I said, an incredible opportunity. Very cool stuff to work on as a hospitality guy. When I left there in 1999, their revenues for Proof of the Pudding had grown from a little over $1 million to a little over $9 million. They're probably at $20 million today or something like that. Still, in all the venues that I talked about, Georgia International, the Gwinnett Civic and Cultural Center, or Gwinnett Convention Center, Proof of the Pudding still has the contracts for those. So they're a successful organization. So to this point, you got 1980 to about 1999, almost 20 years of doing what I enjoyed doing, working in my wheelhouse, so to speak. And that really, I would say, more than anything, or as much as anything, was one of the main reasons that I'm able to be up here today talking to you about the success that I'm having, or that we're having with Peachtree Tents and Events. So I think this is kind of a good place here to jump in, to kind of dive into my second point. And I know it sounds cliche, but I would say it's all about people is number two. For me, the success that we've had and the success that I've had in the business world really is largely in part because I've been able to utilize kind of my relational skills. I don't have a lot of skills, but my people skills is usually one of the better things that I have. And when I talk about it's all about people, I mean, think about kind of your jobs and kind of where you are and how you relate to folks. The mentors that are around you, the good people that you work with in your life, bosses or people that are working in your organization, searching out people that can help. That's a people. That's all about people, your mentors. And I had some really good mentors. The guy that was the club manager at Cherokee Town Club, a guy named John Jordan, was recognized as the best club manager in the country. And not just a good club manager, he was recognized as the best. George A. Strike, Guy Thompson, who I mentioned earlier, I just really found that working for people that I respected and were good leaders was just critical in my development as a young manager. And then the peers, folks that you work around, treating people kindly and with respect, and being humble humble but confident in what you do. So not only the mentors being people, your peers, your employees. Fortunately, it really, in the industry, in the hospitality industry, you're only as good as the folks that are interacting with your clients. I'm not interacting with everybody every day. So if we did a big banquet for 500 people, my direction to the 30 or 50 waiters that were taking care of those people were guys, and I hate to boil it down to this, but it was like, just be nice, okay? Because if everything else falls around us and the food's cold or we don't execute, as long as you're pleasant and you're nice, then you know what? The clients can't be that mad. Okay? Because let's be real, bad stuff happens, okay? And you're only, in what we do, you're only as good as how you respond in a difficult situation. Everybody's good. Everybody can walk out here and be happy and smile all day when everything's going perfect, right? That's easy. It's how you respond when things are tough that separates you from your competition. And if you would go around, I bet you every waiter in this city has worked for me at some point. I mean, I run into people all the time. They're like, how do I know you? I'm like, well, were you a waiter at some point? And like, yeah, that's how. I'm like, okay, well, you probably worked for me when I was at Proof of the Pudding. So, but if you were to ask them, what does Jeff Terry say? What is his main thing that he says? It's always, be nice, smile to these people, okay? And it's just really, it's really been, that right there is probably one of the most important things I've ever really honed in on in terms of success. And that goes to your clients, obviously. Of course, everybody's gonna be nice to their clients, hopefully. That's not always the case. But what about your vendors? People that you interact with where you're the client. Do you treat them with respect? Do you treat them kindly? Do you treat them like they're part of your clients too? Because at the end of the day, for us, I build my business through word of mouth and referral. And I definitely don't need somebody saying, they do a good job, but you know what? That girl on the phone, she's not very nice. She's kind of got an attitude. She's a little bit arrogant. So really, to my second point, and I don't like to it's pretty simple to say, just be nice, okay? But it is kind of that easy if you're just nice. So the best compliment I would get was how nice your staff. It was never, y'all did a great job, the food was the best I ever had, y'all executed unbelievably well. When I got the comment that my staff was smiling and nice, that's what I took pride in. So for me, kind of getting us through this first and second point, working in my wheelhouse and doing things that I enjoy doing, and then, combined with a hospitable nature and treating people with respect and being nice to them, I would absolutely are two of the biggest contributing factors to the success I've had as a business person. So now we kind of get to the rest of this story, all right? Let's pick up here about the year 2000, okay? I had left Proof of the Pudding in 1999, and I was entertaining an offer from Sambuca Jazz Cafes to be their director of sales, okay? I don't know if y'all are familiar with Sambuca. There was one here on Piedmont for years. Quite frankly, it lasted longer than I ever would have thought it would, but they recently closed down here. But they are a restaurant, jazz club with a heavy bar scene. And they were 5 restaurants in 4 cities, and their corporate office was in Dallas. Pretty cool spot, live jazz, heavy bar, and good food, for the most part. So they were putting this offer out for me to become their director of sales, and that was a hip, it was cool. That was kind of a sexy position, okay? If you're in the industry, it's a high profile. You're getting to know a lot of folks. You got entertainment. You're whining and dining. And, so this kind of comes down to where the third thing that I want to kind of talk about a little bit is decision making. You could call it judgment, decision making, and then calculating risk, okay? But first you have to understand a little bit about me and personally what was going on in my life at that time. It's 2000. I've been married for 8 years, and I have 2 little girls at home. Madeline is 3 at the time. Mary Frances is 1. Once again, that job offer is kind of right in my wheelhouse. It's right up my alley, and it was entertaining people, whining and dining, come on in, I'll take care of you. Cool bar atmosphere, kind of fun, definitely fun. So right in my wheelhouse, but I know I hadn't mentioned at this point other things that were in my wheelhouse, so to speak. Stuff that over the years had become part of my wheelhouse is stuff. What kind of stuff are we talking about? I like to call it social partying, maybe. That's doing it lightly, probably. Drinking, carousing, cocktails, being flirtatious, going over lines I shouldn't go over while I'm married and I got 2 little girls at home. All of these things were in my wheelhouse. And if you're in the hospitality industry, you fit right in. That's what it's all about, okay? So, these behaviors are stuff that had been a part of me since high school. You know, I really have to go back and, you know, I was aware and conscious of my weaknesses, and my shortcomings. At this point in time, I'm a pretty self-aware guy. I just don't listen to myself very well. So calculating risk, knowing all too well the hazards and the pitfalls that this type of environment would create for me as a father of a couple young girls and a wife at home. You know, I kind of succumbed to the sexiness and the coolness of the job, and I took the job, you know. And it was at a time, it was a great financial offer, brand new Chevy Tahoe, you know, when everybody had Chevy Tahoes, you know. Now nobody wants one, yeah. Another poor decision. But it was, you know, so anyway, it was one of those deals where I could wine and dine, you know, whoever I felt like and whoever I wanted to. And I would ask you, you know, consider yourself, when you're in these moments in time where you're having decisions to make, really dig deep and say, how's this going to impact my family? How's it going to impact? Well, I know it's a cool job and I know the money's great, but you know what? Maybe being on the road 3 nights a week is not the best thing for me. Everybody's got their stuff, okay? So anyway, real quick disclaimer, Sambuca Jazz Cafes is a great organization. Some great people. This isn't about Sambuca Jazz Cafes, this is about me and what an idiot I was, okay? Stupid decisions. But I had a lot of success there professionally. You know, we did what we needed to do for growing that business and putting them on the map when they opened up. But personally, my life was unraveling, okay? This was not going well, and it wasn't going well at all, okay? I did not calculate the risk involved to my family. When I talk about calculating risk, I did not think about the impact this job would have on my daughters and on my wife. Given the type of position this was, and given my lack of discipline, which I still struggle with today, and my lack of self-control, and my lack of faith, well, this kind of behavior, this self-indulgent lifestyle, you know, this wheelhouse guy that I'm talking to you about, this just be nice guy that I'm talking to you about, you know, it eventually, it resulted in me being unfaithful to my wife and to my girls. And at the end, the best way to put it is destruction of my family, okay? We were separated and we eventually were divorced in 2005. Okay, so how did I get there? How did I get there? Okay, well, like most good Southern boys, I was raised in church. I attended Sunday school, even sang in the choir till my mom just couldn't get me to go there anymore. I had a loving family. My mom and dad still together, living Cumming, very close to them. Sister, her family in Dawsonville, all-American kind of upbringing, okay? But however, at the age of 14, man, I started making poor decisions that would affect the rest of my life. Poor decisions like what? Drinking at 14, smoking dope at 14, chasing girls, doing whatever felt good to me at the time. Not unlike a lot of people, okay? Unfortunately, but was I a bad kid? I wasn't a bad kid. I was a popular kid. I was quarterback on the football team, center fielder on the baseball team. I wasn't a mean kid. Even that being nice stuff, I was nice back then too. I wasn't mean. I just liked to party. I just liked to have a good time. But I was establishing poor lifestyle habits that would follow me around to this day, okay? My partying became a significant part of my life. I mean, heck, it's really celebrated in this industry. Like the more you party in the hospitality industry, that's kind of, I'm not knocking the industry, but you know what? It is what it is. So it was ingrained in me. It really defined me. And you know what? It cost me my first marriage. My successful career, if you want to call it successful, had given way to my unsuccessful marriage. Life, the important stuff that Randy alluded to, had been marginalized by me by trying to maintain an image, a lifestyle that was not sustainable. My poor decision-making had caught up me with a vengeance. Life had not worked and was not working. The worst day of my life was having to sit down with my two girls, okay, who were 6 and 4 now at this time. I had to sit down with them and tell them in our den that we were separating, okay? It was, no parent should ever have to tell their children that, and no child should ever have to process that information, okay? There's not a word, I try to think of something to describe the pain in that. There's no word I can come up with that can really communicate that emotion of having to do that day in their lives. But, I would tell you, man, there's no level of worldly success that matters if it comes at the expense of your family. So what do you do? Where do you turn? I'm sure y'all know people with this story. There's no way in this room we don't know people that know this story, okay? I mean, I was living in an apartment, seeing my girls on my nights. I mean, you know, and when people say, oh, it's for the best, that's not true. It's not true that it's for the best to get divorced. That never is true. It's not okay for your kids. It might be, maybe you don't get along, and might be some extenuating circumstances where that might make sense. I don't even know how, but because it doesn't go away. The consequences of that just continue to be around. So, you know, let's kind of move on from there. I think you know what I'm talking about, and get to what I call the better part or the good part of this story. By the sheer grace of God, a woman came into my life, Rachel Bass, and she challenged me from day one to be a better human being and a better person. And I really needed to be I had to be a better person. It wasn't working, so I needed to be a better person. I wanted to be a better person. I wanted to be a better person for my kids. Just my whole being was hurting for what I had done and my responsibility and the destruction of my family. So let's go back to this third point that I talked about, decision-making, calculating risks. I have a buddy of mine within the hospitality industry named Dave Dories, who's a consultant, and I went to see him on Rachel's behalf, and he had the courage and the love to invite me to join a group of men that were meeting on Friday mornings at a restaurant just like this. And at the time, he didn't know where I was in my faith. He didn't know any of that. He knew I was broken, and he knew I needed help. And he had the courage to step out and invite me to join this group of men. So, you know, my life at that point had not worked. I mean, really the first 39 years. I've talked about some success I've had as a businessman, but really, I mean, how can you say your life works when you get a divorce and your kids aren't living with you? Hadn't worked, okay? But the risk of joining those men, when I took that risk, I thought about, all right, what do I have to lose? You know, I calculated the risk, and I joined him on those Friday mornings. For that entire year in 2005, every Friday morning, I had the privilege of being with men who are authentic, strong examples of men who follow Jesus Christ. Now, they lived out their Christian faith, not in their marriages, in their families, and also in their businesses, okay? These are real guys. These are real men. They have real issues. We were talking about stuff that, you know, real stuff that's going on in people's lives. Death, loss, no job, no money, you know, everything. So, you know, but their example in that Friday morning group setting with those guys in this restaurant convinced me that I needed, desired, and wanted Jesus Christ in my life as well. So in 2006, within those walls on Friday morning at On the Border restaurant, that's where I made the decision to, you know, and only through God's grace and His incredible patience with me, I turned away from my sins. I asked, if not begged, for forgiveness, And I too began to follow Jesus Christ. So here I am today, 5 years later. And what's the million-dollar question? You know, how is life different today after making that very wise, calculated decision? I mean, if I were truly to stand up here and have a PowerPoint and list all the things that have happened, I don't think you would believe it, okay? Because it's really quite remarkable. But I'm going to give you a couple of the highlights. My family, Rachel, who I talked about earlier, I adore her. We have an unbelievably strong relationship that is grounded in our faith. We love each other. We support each other. Randy talked, I've got a 14-month-old baby girl. And you're talking about a blessing. You know, she is just an incredible. Tori Grace, awesome. I've got a 14-year-old daughter, Madeline. Mary Frances, awesome, awesome. 3 girls. You know, in all of my relationships, I'm definitely more faithful. I'm more understanding. I'm more loving. I'm more patient. I'm more forgiving. My decision-making, calculating risk, now that I have kind of that peace that comes knowing that God is with me on this stuff, you know, it enabled me to open up Peachtree Tents and Events in June of 2006. We're now in our 6th year. I touched on it a little bit, but I'm working in my wheelhouse still. I've established a culture there of treating people kindly. And you know what? I'm making wiser, more calculated, godly decisions. Jesus Christ inspires confidence and peace for me to run that business. You know, we have revenues approaching almost $4 million this year in 5 years in a down economy in an industry that's affected by the economy. But, you know, I can point that success to good quality decision making. So I don't want to leave you with the wrong impression here this morning, okay? My life isn't all, I can't wrap this up with a neat little bow, okay? My 14-year-old daughter is struggling. She's still struggling big time emotionally from the trauma of the divorce. That was 8 years ago, and this child is struggling with it. You know, it is what it is. The consequences of my poor decisions and life without God are they're still there, okay? Life by no stretch is perfect, and Jesus Christ is not finished with me by any stretch of the imagination, okay? But I want to just kind of real quickly talk about that group of men that I went to those Friday mornings and that group setting of people. I'm actually leading a table over there now where we get together and we talk about it. And the benefit from that group table environment that I've experienced over the last Fridays, every Friday for the last 6 years, the fellowship, the accountability, the mentoring has been, the transparency has been invaluable to me as a businessman, invaluable to me as a father, invaluable to me as a husband. So I would encourage y'all this morning to take a calculated risk. You already took a calculated risk getting up and coming in here at 6 a.m. to hear me talk. So let's take a calculated risk. And when Randy comes up here in a few minutes to talk about the leadership groups, the mentoring and the accountability that can be fostered within these group environments, I would really encourage you to think long and hard about it being the right fit for you and at least seeing if it works. Because I can honestly say, without me going into that group setting with those men at that type of environment, at that level of transparency and fellowship, there's no way that I would contend that I'm not even involved in this company any longer. I know I wouldn't be here talking to you this morning. The profound impact that environment made on me as a man and as a leader for my company is unbelievable. So, I'm going to thank you guys for your time. Thank you for listening to what I have to say. I hope that you take a little bit out of it and you can use it in your lives somehow, some way. And I'm going to turn it back over to Randy now. He's going to talk to you a little bit about the leadership groups, and I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. All right, thank you.